Zovaal was an eternal one that presided over the Maw in the Shadowlands, and was also known as the Jailer or the Banished One. He ruled over the Sanctum of Domination in Torghast, the Tower of the Damned, wielding powerful domination magic and being the sole and absolute master of the Maw. The realm constantly changed and altered itself to his whims, and he observed all notable actions within his domain through his magical eye. The Jailer tortured and twisted wretched souls who came in the realm until they gladly served him for eternity as his Maw-sworn warriors. Zovaal was once known as the Arbiter, in charge of evaluating the souls who passed into the afterlife. He later attempted to upset the universe balance, believing that the First One's creation was defective and unable to withstand the threat that he had predicted. He attempted to claim the sigils of his fellow Eternal Ones, intending to use them to gain access to the sepulchre in the First One's realm of Zereth Mortis, whose secrets will allow him to undo reality and replace it with one in which everyone would serve him. His counterpart stripped him of his power, imprisoned him in the Maw with the newly formed magic of domination, and created a new arbiter to replace him as a punishment for attempting to take their sigils. Throughout his years in captivity, the Jailer learned to control the domination that bound him, and he continued to plot and collaborate with numerous partners in both the Shadowlands and the living world, such as the Netherzeem, all with the same objective of reaching the sepulchre. He set his sights on the mortal realm of Azeroth, intending to rewrite reality with the power of his world soul. He imprisoned one of his brothers, the Primus, and used him to build the Helm of Domination and Frostmourne, which the Netherzeem then delivered to the Lich King, who Zovaal intended to use as a herald to help him reach Azeroth. All three mortals who would become known as the Lich King, however, rejected his goal. The Jailer later collaborated with Sylvanas Windrunner, who thought that his ultimate purpose was to overthrow the unjust afterlife system and replace it with a just one. A gambit by the Jailer and his Netherzeem succeeded in rendering the Arbiter inert for not long after. Instead, all souls who entered the Shadowlands began flooding into the Maw, boosting the Jailer as the remainder of the Shadowland withered due to shortage of anima. The Forsworn in Bastion, Kel'Thuzad in Maldraxxus, Mozala in Ardenweld, and Sire Denathrius in Revendreth used the drought to sow instability among the most important afterlives and the covenants that regulated them, preventing them from uniting against the Jailer. On Azeroth, Sylvanas broke the Helm of Domination, causing a split between the mortal world and the Shadowlands, and enslaving numerous Azeroth leaders. He utilized the power of domination to convert one of them, King Anduin Wrynn, into his unwilling champion. Despite the fact that Azeroth's adventurers known as Maw Walkers invaded the Shadowlands and helped reinforce and reconnect the covenants, the Jailer was able to get the sigils of the other Eternal Ones. He stormed Oribos, the Arbiter's home, with Sylvanas' help, and claimed the final sigil his own from her. When Sylvanas saw his true aims, she rebelled against him, but he cast her aside and utilized the sigils to escape with Anduin via portal to Zereth Mortis. The Maw-Walkers pursued him, and after liberating Anduin and established a resistance to his domination magic, confronted and destroyed Zovaal in the heart of the sepulchre of the First Ones, before he could finish this objective of harnessing Azeroth's life power to do undue existence. The Jailer was an evil that predated reality. Zovaal was formed by the First Ones in their domain of Zereth Mortis and given life in the crypts of the Eternal, together with his fellow Eternal Ones. He was appointed Arbiter, in charge of assessing mortal souls entering the Shadowlands and allocating them to the proper afterlives, and he and his siblings were given sigils reflecting the purpose of their contracts. The Eternal Ones were forbidden by the First Ones to return to Zereth Mortis. However, at some point, Zovaal began to believe that the First Ones' ideas were flawed, and that the divided cosmos they had built would not be able to withstand an unknown future threat. He believed the Eternal One's sigils were keys to forbidden knowledge hidden under Zereth Mortis' sepulchre and the First Ones, which he might use to destroy the reality he perceived as flawed and replace it with a new, united reality in which all would serve him. When his siblings chastised him for his heresy, he attempted to take their sigils by force. Zovaal was so powerful that it took the whole Pantheon of Death to destroy him, yet the Primus of Maldraxxus led them to victory in the end. In Oribos, the Pantheon put Zovaal on trial. Kerestia, the Firstborn, found him guilty of betraying his duty as Arbiter, and the Winter Queen declared that he had threatened the entire cycle of life and death, while Sire Denathrius ambiguously told Zovaal that he could have chosen a different path and that they could have accomplished great things together. When the Primus questioned him about his betrayal, Zovaal explained that the Eternal Ones were only saving a doomed cosmos. The Eternal Ones punished Zovaal by banishing him into the inescapable Maw, where he would serve as his jailer for all eternity. They took his anima and insignia and used them to make a new arbiter to judge souls in his place, leaving a gaping hole in the center of his chest. To keep Zovaal imprisoned, the Primus devised an entirely new magic system, the Language of Domination, and used its runes to inscribe the Eternal One's punishment on his brother's flesh. The power of Ardenweald's Heart of the Forest was employed to keep the Maw imprisoned to ensure Zovaal would be chained indefinitely. The Pantheon of Death considered Zovaal's incarceration absolute and irreversible with these tactics. The Primus had thought that ages of confinement would enable Zovaal to repent from his transgressions, but they just made him more evil. Over time, the jailer discovered a means to weaponize Domination's power and utilize it against his foes, and he never lost up on his objective of returning the power that had been taken from him and seeing his plans through to completion. Zovaal did not act alone in this original treason. Unbeknownst to the other Eternal Ones, he had a number of like-minded allies who kept operating on his behalf after his imprisonment and have affected numerous events on the mortal plane throughout history. Denathrius, ruler of Revendreth, was one of them, having freely given his insignia to the jailer at some point. Denathrius also developed the Nethrezim, a race of master spies that infiltrated the other cosmic forces and expanded Death's influence. Many Nethrezim pretended to serve the Burning Legion and used death magic to corrupt the giant world soul of the planet Argus and transform him into a maul with which to crush the Arbiter. If Argus was ever destroyed, his soul would go to Ouroboros and render a new Arbiter inactive. The Loa Muazala, another ally of the jailer, forged a deal with the Titanic Keeper Odin, seizing one of his eyes in exchange for the capacity to see into the Shadowlands. As a result, Odin created the Valkyr to look into like the Shadowlands Kyrian. Muazala handed Odin's eye to the jailer, who twisted it into the eye of the jailer, a device that allows him to see all that happens in the Maw and possibly beyond. Muazala also brought the first Valkyr, Helia, to the jailer's side at some point. The souls of the four wicked giants were formerly cursed to the Maw: Bemethra, Restimorak, Nilganamath, and Salaranga. The jailer was delighted with their vast list of life offenses, so he encased their souls in armor and promoted them to become his chosen torturers. However, the four conspired to usurp him by assembling their own army. When the giants attacked, the eye of the jailer detected their plan and it defeated them one by one. Instead of merely destroying their souls, he took a hand from each and cast their broken spirits into the Jorjoa River for all eternity. He then instructed the chronicler Verithoman to keep a record of the giants' misdeeds and punishments as a warning to others not to resist the Banished One. The story of the jailer's captivity became a legend among the Shadowlanders throughout time, passed down only in whispers. He became renowned as a boogeyman figure, and his name was thought to have sinister power just by saying it. Even the attendant's meticulous records in Ouroboros only made passing mention of the circumstances surrounding his exile. In fact, for most of the known history of the Shadowlands, there was no indication that the jailer even existed, let alone what he looked like or what his role was beyond watching the souls doomed to the Maw, for nothing that entered the realm could leave and tell the tale. The Ouroboros attendants were ignorant that the jailer had previously served as the Arbiter, and mistakenly believed that the artificial Arbiter they served was the original one constructed by the first ones themselves. However, some very old and worn records still exist that refer to a time when the Arbiter was not quite so benevolent, meaning that they are vestiges from the time that when Zovaal was the Arbiter. The jailer was claimed to be filled with hatred for the Arbiter by the attendants, and Talinara feared that if he killed her, it would signal the end of everything the first ones had created. When the Primus realized that the jailer's influence was leaking outside the Maw, he dispatched Maldraxxus to investigate. Before departing, he left a warning note in his sanctum, instructing his fellow Eternal Ones to strengthen their defenses to keep Zovaal from reaching the sepulchre, and to remember that everything would be lost if the Arbiter was not safeguarded. He then journeyed to Korthia, where he committed his insignia to the city's attendants and tied it with memory magic that not even Zovaal could disentangle. The Primus's fears were confirmed once he had arrived in the Maw. The jailer had turned his shackles into a weapon and used it to defeat his brother. The jailer deprived him of his memories and turned him into a broken prisoner known as the Rune Carver, in a reversal of how the Primus had once imprisoned him. From the Rune Carver's mind, The jailer pulled innumerable blueprints for his Mossworn army, and most prominent of which were the plans for the Mornblade Frostmourne and the Helm of Domination. Zovaal had come to the conclusion that the immense power of the World Soul slumbering within the mortal world of Azeroth would be the key to his plans of eradicating reality, and he intended for the Blade and the Helm, the vessels of domination, to be a means of establishing his dominance on the planet, in order to acquire his final prize, the secret that the First Ones wished to conceal. The Nashie, posing as members of the Burning Legion, carried the domination vessels over the Veil and used them to imprison Ner'zhul, the first Lich King's soul. Nethrezim duped the Legion, a force of disorder, into believing that the Lich King was simply their instrument and not an instrument of death, and therefore deceived them into aiding the Jailer in spreading his power on the mortal plane. The Jailer wanted the Lich King to proclaim his arrival and reign on Azeroth, thus he sought to sway Ner'zhul and his successor Arthas Menethil and Bolvar Fordragon from afar, but their wills and decisions remained their own, and they all eventually disobeyed his will. Ner'zhul's soul eventually ended up in the Maw, where the Jailer informed him of his failures as a herald and sentenced him to endless torment in his fortress, the Sanctum of Domination. Following Arthas' defeat, the two Kyrians, Davos and Uther, flung his soul into the Maw, where the Jailer claimed it. Bolvar could sense the Jailer's presence at the edge of his consciousness during the tenure as a Lich King, and recognized that Zovaal was the true master of the Helm. After her suicide at the Icecrown Citadel, Sylvanas Windrunner joined with the Jailer. He dispatched the Nine, a group of Valkyr, to strike a covenant with her, allowing her to return to the living world and claim the Helm of Domination from Bolvar, the False King. Since then, Sylvanas and the Jailer have been working towards a shared goal. Sylvanas earned the power to use the Maw's domination magic as a result of their bond. Muazzala murmured to Vol'jin on his deathbed at the start of the Burning Legion's third invasion on Azeroth, pleading with him to choose Sylvanas as the Horde's new war chief. Azeroth's heroes killed Argus' soul at the end of the invasion. This caused Argus' spirit to journey to Oribos and render the Arbiter inert, as the Nethrezim had anticipated. In her absence, all souls entering the Shadowlands began funneling into the Maw rather than being sorted to their proper afterlives, depleting the other worlds of Adama and posing a threat to the Jailer's ability to break free from the Maw. In the living world, Sylvanas utilized her position as war chief to plunge Azeroth into the Fourth War, resulting in massive fatalities and providing the Maw with even more new souls to recruit in the Mossworn army, allowing her and the Jailer to rise in power. The Jailer sought to reclaim what was his after his bonds were broken. Prince Renathal believed that if the Jailer escaped, all of Death's realm would be destroyed. Lady Moonberry, likewise, believed that the released Jailer would plunge all of the Shadowlands worlds into unending crushing gloom. Meanwhile, Sire Denetrius and Herald Delora believed that the Jailer would usher in a flood of change, leaving Death and those who molded his victory as the sole remaining powers. Sylvanas said in a private chat with Anduin Wrynn that the Jailer will break the Death system and rebuild it, giving everyone true free choice. Davos of the Forsworn saw Zovaal's captivity by the Eternal Ones to be a grave injustice, and he seeks to release us from the prison we have made for ourselves. The Jailer's Mossworn Kyrian kidnapped leaders of Azeroth's Alliance and Horde Anduin Wrynn, Jaina Proudmoore, Thrall and Bane Bloodhoof, and brought them to the Maw after Sylvanas destroyed the Helm of Domination and tore open a rift through the Veil, separating the Shadowlands from the world of the living. These 4 inmates piqued the Jailer's curiosity, and he personally oversaw their torturing. According to Thrall, it felt as if the Jailer was putting them to the test for some unknown reason. Because his plans to gather the sigils of the other Eternal Ones required a mortal with heroic personal characteristics that would allow them to enter the realm of Bastion, the Jailer sought Anduin specifically. The Knights of the Ebon Blade and the heroes of Azeroth rushed into the Maw to save the leaders, and Jaina, Thrall and Anduin were among them. After the Jailer pronounced the Tauren chieftain unworthy and hurled him over a platform, Bane joined the group. The Azerothians then fought their way to a First One's eroded waystone in the hopes of using it to escape the Maw. The Jailer was taken aback when he saw the waystone react to Azeroth's champions and dispatched his Mossworn army to stop them, but Anduin utilized the light to stave off the attackers long enough for the champions to flee. When Anduin protested that he had failed, the Jailer said calmly, "No, I have exactly what I need." The Jailer then took Anduin, Thrall, Jaina and Bane to Torghast to be tortured further. The adventurers, now known as Maw Walkers, eventually broke inside the Primus' seat and discovered the Primus' warning. When Sylvanas told the Jailer of this, he stated that while it was regrettable, it was of minor importance and that the annoyance would be addressed. Not long after, Sire Denetrius exposed himself to be in cahoots with the Jailer, channeling vast quantities of anima into the Maw. According to Prince Renathal, the Jailer would undoubtedly utilize this power to break these shackles. The remaining Eternal Ones and Covenant leaders then decided that each mortal must select a Covenant in order for the realms to be rebuilt their strength and fight the darkness once more. The Maw-Walkers frequently journeyed into Torghast, guided by Bolvar, who used the shards of the Helm of Domination to see into the tower to rescue their kidnapped companions and bring Bane, Jaina and Thrall to the safety of Oribos. Bolvar's frequent gazes into the tower eventually caused the Jailer to return the stairs, and the heroes were unable to locate Anduin, who had been carried deeper into the Torghast than the others. The Jailer told Sylvanas in a private conversation that they needed to start preparing their next weapon. Sylvanas persuaded the Jailer to hand over Anduin to her, reasoning that converting him to their cause would generate better results. As time went on, and Sylvanas failed to persuade Anduin, the Jailer determined that a more direct approach was required. The Jailer chose to employ domination to control Anduin directly after his prior failures with the Lich King. He turned Anduin's sword Charlemagne into a Mornblade, King's Morn, and implanted what was remained of Arthas Menethil's soul into it and served as the source of Anduin's domination. Simultaneously, Sire Denethrius was vanquished and captured, and Sylvanas inquired of the Jailer as to how they should get him back. The Jailer simply replied that each soul served a function, and Denethrius had completed his. He went on to say that it was time to make their next weapon, and that they'd come too far to fail. While Sylvanas delivered the completed Kingsmorn to Anduin and attempted one final time to persuade him to join them freely, the Jailer used the Helm of Domination to attack Bolvar and Oribos in an attempt to take control of his mind. Jaina and the Maw-Walker, on the other hand, were able to break the link. The Jailer pulled a fragment of the long-lost realm of Korthia into the Maw from the In-Between, specifically in search of the Vault of Secrets and its most valuable treasure, the Sigil of the Primus, in the hopes of uncovering secrets of the First Ones and the key to fulfilling his visions of the Shadowlands. Sylvanas forcibly dominated Anduin after failing to persuade him, outfitting him with Kingsmorn and a suit of armor covered in domination runes, allowing the Jailer to control his actions. The Jailer dispatched his new ship to Elysian Hold in Bastion in order to retrieve the symbol of Kirestia, the Kyrian Archon. Kirestia was aware of the Jailer's presence in Anduin and requested that the latter free the king. "He is chained to me, just as you once wanted to bind your own brother," the Jailer's voice spoke via Anduin in response. Anduin then used Kingsmorn to stab the Archon in the chest, extracting her insignia and returning it to Torghast. 3 keys remained, according to the Jailer, until they realized that death was never meant to be shackled. The Winter's Queen insignia was the Jailer's next target. He sent his Mawsorn to invade Ardenweald, headed by Sylvanas herself, and the 4 Covenants hastened to defend it. Turan the Whisperwind confronted Sylvanas during the battle and stated that she had murdered Nathanas Blightcaller, the latter's champion. Turan mockingly told Sylvanas that the Jailer was deliberately hiding information from her because he was astonished. The Mawsorn were eventually driven out of Ardenweald by the Covenants, but Anduin managed to infiltrate the heart of the forest and seize the Winter Queen's insignia. Meanwhile, the Jailer's soldiers attacked Oribos in an attempt to seize another sigil, the Arbiters, but the Covenants and Knights of the Ebonblade were able to repel the attackers. The Maw-Walkers led the Covenant forces into the Maw into Korthia, unwilling to wait for the Jailer to make his next move. To prevent the Jailer from destroying the Maw's barrier and invading the remainder of the Shadowlands, the Maw-Walkers in particular collaborated with Odin's Valkyr to fight the Eye of the Jailer and force it to flee the Maw for Torghast's safety. Meanwhile, in a search for the Sepulchre, the Jailer brought a shard of Seraph Mortis, the land of the First Ones, into a seat of power, the Sanctum of Domination atop Torghast, which contained Sepulchre access ciphers. He also had his Nathrezim minions kidnap Korthia's fate scribe, Rogue Kallo, and bring him to the Sanctum so they may rip knowledge from his head. Before the Mawsorn could reclaim the Primus' symbol from the Vault of Secrets, a Maw-Walker, the attendant commander Talagalan, and the Primus apprentice Hermir recovered it in Korthia. Hermir and the Maw-Walker brought it to the Runecarver in Torghast in the hopes of untangling the enchantment tying it, which restored all of his memories and transformed him back into the Primus. The Jailer was quick to detect and arrived with the Mawsworn army at the Runecarver's oubliette. While Hermir and the hero fought, the minions Zovaal and the Primus engaged in a fight of energy beams. The Jailer stunned Hermir and the Maw-Walker and summoned Anduin as the conflict progressed. The Primus told his brother that if he was killed, the sigil would be lost forever, but he hadn't expected Anduin to be wielding a Mornblade. Anduin used Kingsmorn to tear the Primus' insignia from his body and fling it into the Jailer's waiting palm. Zovaal teleported himself and his minions away after obtaining all but one of the sigils he required, allowing the Primus and his companions to escape Torghast alive. The Primus thought Zovaal was a fool for allowing them to survive, and that his desire to have them submit to his will would be his downfall. He went on to say that the mortals would have to confront Zovaal in the Sanctum of Domination. As a backup plan, each covenant had to make fresh sigils so that they could pursue Zovaal if the assault failed. Later, the Maulwalkers and their allies Bolvar, Thrall and Jaina attacked the Sanctum, fought past the Jailer's minions and met Sylvanas at the tower pinnacle of the Domination. She held him up long enough for the Jailer to carry out his plan, which was to expand the Ma's limits around Oribos rather than break out. With his chains snagged the city, and ascended to the Arbiter's chamber, the Crucible, where he began breaking down the city's defenses. The heroes were kept occupied by Sylvanas and Anduin long enough for Zovaal to break the Arbiter's shield and merge them with her by absorbing her essence. The orb-shaped symbol entered and filled the hole in his chest, restoring his anima and allowing him to reclaim this full set of armor that had been taken from him by the other Eternals. The victorious Jailer used domination to incapacitate Thrall, Bolvar and Jaina before opening a massive portal to Zereth Mortis. Sylvanas told Zovaal that they now had everything they needed, but he replied that he had enough of the Maker's flawed design and revealed his true goal: not to break the system of death and give everyone free will as Sylvanas had believed, but to create a new reality in which everyone would be forced to serve him. Sylvanas launched a black arrow at the Jailer, which he caught without even looking at her, and warned him that she would never serve him, thereby turning against him, recalling similar declarations by Arthas and the Lich King. The Jailer responded after a little pause that it was a shame, and that she was still tied by mortality. He handed Sylvanas the portion of her soul that had been cut by Frostmourne many years before, forcing her to fall comatose, as payment for helping him reclaim what had been stolen from him. The Jailer released the Maulwalker's friends and put Sylvanas' destiny in their hands, instructing Anduin to accompany him and see the end of reality. The two exited the portal, which shut behind them. Sylvanas remained comatose as the lost portion of her soul was forced to relive the crimes that the remainder of her soul had done over the years, sins that the Jailer believed would inevitably kill her. Back in Korthia, the Primus cautioned that if Zovaal found the information he sought in the sepulchre, everything would be undone. He then set about devising a plan to track down the Jailer and bring him to Zereth Mortis. Zovaal disobeyed the First One's creator's most sacred commandments by returning to the forbidden realm of Zereth Mortis. His Maulsworn spread like a virus across the realm in pursuit of a route to the sepulchre. The Maulsworn laid siege to the enlightened settlement of Haven at first, but the Jailer personally arrived to call off the attack since he considered the location was unimportant. The Maulsworn utilized domination to take control of Audema, the realm's caretakers, and demolished the obelisks protecting the Forge of Afterlives while the Maulwalkers and their allies arrived in Zereth Mortis. Meanwhile, Nethrezim, commanded by Mal'Ganis, infiltrated the Covenants in an attempt to sabotage their efforts. When confronted by a Maulwalker, Mal'Ganis explained that this was all of a ruse to buy time for Zovaal and his champion to reach the Forge of Afterlives. Anduin, the Audema guarding the Forge, dominated the Segna under the direction of the Jailer. The Jailer then showed up in person and forced the Segna to disable the Forge, allowing him to use it to transport himself, Anduin, and the Segna directly into the sepulchre, and closed the door behind them. Uther the Lightbringer, back in Oribos, assisted Sylvanas in waking up from her coma. She joined forces with the Maulwalkers and their friends, telling them that without a way to fight Zovaal's domination, they had no chance of defeating him, and that liberating Anduin might be the solution. The Maulwalkers confronted Anduin at the Domination's grasp and helped gradually restore his willpower after opening the path inside the sepulchre and fighting through its defenders. But the Jailer refused to relinquish his grip on the Monarch. While Kingsmourn appeared to be draining his soul, he whispered to him and complete his ultimate purpose, annihilation. But Anduin mustered the strength to split Kingsmourn in half, liberating himself from the Jailer and releasing the fading residues of Arthas' spirit. Zovaal, on the other hand, was already on the verge of victory, having entered the sepulchre's final chamber, Heart of Eternity, and installed domination to keep anyone from following him. Anduin was taken out by the sepulchre by the heroes, but he had no idea how to deal with the Jailer's power. The Maulwalkers and their allies, guided by the Primus, instead used the language of the First Ones and the resistance that Anduin and the other domination victims had built up to reforge the fragments of the Helm of Domination into a new object of power, the Crown of Wills. The crown made the heroes immune to domination, which Bolvar and the Primus thought would be the key to eventually conquering Zovaal. When Maulwalkers returned to the sepulchre, defeated the Jailer's Dreadlord minions and the Constellar he had dominated, and confronted him in the Heart of Eternity just as he completed his final plan. He activated the Forge of Souls beneath Icecrown to draw a soul of Azeroth's life force into the sepulchre, which he could then use to power the machine of origination. The Maw-walkers, on the other hand, were able to defend Azeroth from its jailer attacks, preventing him from configuring the machine, and ultimately defeat him thanks to their resistance to domination. He gazed in horror as both his armor and his body vanished and as he dropped to his knees. A cosmos divided will not survive what it's come to, Zovaal said in his closing hours, echoing what he had said to the other Eternal Ones during his original treachery millennia before. He then lost the remainder of his power, leaving only a lifeless vessel behind. With Zovaal's death, Azeroth was rescued, and the gap in the sky that Sylvanas had opened over Icecrown was closed. Bolvar commented after Zovaal's death that the suspicion he had sown in each of his foes had survived. And that is the story of Zovaal the Jailer. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.